Hey, welcome to the Strong Roots podcast. My name is Kristen Hill, and we are so excited that you're tuning in today. Our prayer is that you would move one step closer to Jesus through this series. So go ahead and check out this next episode. Hey, Strong Roots, we are in our Parenthood season, and I'm here with Pastor John. And today we are talking about gospel framework. And honestly, I couldn't think of anyone better to interview throughout this whole Parenthood season because Pastor John has so much to say and so much wisdom and insight, and I'm really excited to learn from him during this whole thing. But Pastor John, I want to ask you the first question. How do we even define gospel?
Well, gospel framework, because that's what we're talking about today, is building a framework of the gospel in your house as you raise your kids, making it like the core skeleton of parenting, like the structure that supports it all. Yeah. And I mean, the gospel is the message that we're born sinful and sin separates us from God, and we need the grace of God in our life. And that's the gospel through Jesus. That's it. Yeah,
good definition. So how does the gospel influence your decision-making in your home?
I mean, I think as a parent, it's a huge deal. I think that parents who don't have an understanding of the gospel misprioritize what we're raising our kids to do. I'm not raising my kids to be successful.
Right.
My kids will be successful, I think, if they embrace the gospel of Jesus Christ. Because fundamentally, the problem with kids is sin, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, education, not knowing things, growing, and, baby wonderment and all the things that we want. But fundamentally, our job as a parent is to refine our kids' character through the grace of Jesus and then through spiritual growth by causing them to turn from sin and turn to Jesus. That's like the big goal.
Right.
And I think a lot of times we overcomplicate this with all these other things. Look, fundamentally, if your kid is working to walk in the grace of Jesus and deal with sin in their life, they're going to be a whole and effective person in any arena, like maritally. Like, you want your kid to marry someone who deals with sin in their life.
Right.
You know what I mean? Through the grace of Jesus. You want to hire employees who deal with sin in their life. You want anything you want in life, even if you're an atheist, you want people who embrace the gospel. Like, that's what you want. So as a parent, the gospel is the goal for our kids. And it sounds really obvious as I'm saying it, but I think a lot of people don't get this. Like, the goal isn't grades, the goal isn't popularity, the goal isn't athleticism. Like, everything falls into place when the gospel is the central framework.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I feel like so often in our homes we can be performance driven.
Oh, yeah.
And not have unconditional love. How do we make sure that we are a household where it's unconditional love and not we're going to give you love when you perform to our expectations?
Sure. At its core, performance driven home is that's a form of idolatry.
Right.
Like, what we're saying is, because the gospel of Jesus, his love is unconditional. Like, it's always available to us. Now, it's not like love doesn't mean always kind or always accepting. It means I'm pointing you to the grace of Jesus, right? Performance-driven households, you fall into this, you need to get good grades or I'm no longer going to guide you. Like, I'm going to shut down or I'll yell at you or I'll no longer provide opportunities for redemption. And that's not the gospel. What that is I'm loving grades or popularity or whatever it is, my kid looking good and not being fat, vanity, whatever, over the core message of Jesus, which is walk in the grace of Jesus for the forgiveness of your sins and refine your character through this biblical process called sanctification that we can, as parents, help foster. So,
absolutely, but there is... our kids need to be obedient. There is law, and then you mentioned grace. How do we, as parents, godly parents, tread both law and grace in our households?
Well, I mean, grace is providing the opportunity, even though it may not be merited, for redemption in a relationship. Like, I forgive you. It doesn't mean that I'm going to remove all earthly consequences for something that you've done. There's a big difference between those two things. In the Bible, we say Jesus removes the spiritual consequence of sin, so we can still have a relationship with God, but there are still earthly consequences, and it's not unchristian to put somebody in jail for a crime they've committed.
Right.
Obviously, I just showed the video in service of there was a black man who was killed in his home by an off-duty white female police officer, and the dead man's brother forgave the woman for what she did. She still went to jail, and that's an earthly consequence. And I don't think it was unchristian of the justice system to put her in jail. I mean, that's something that our society may need. But obviously she was forgiven and released of the enmity from the family. So, yeah, that would be an example of it.
Absolutely. And so kids, they're going to fail.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't matter how godly parents, how godly a kid, you're going to fail. Why is it important to make our home a safe place to fail? And also, how do you do that, practically speaking?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing, and you and I have talked about this, and Kristen's better at this than me, is don't freak out. You know, when your kid tells you something. Like, this is a huge gospel thing. Don't, like, your kid may tell you, like, hey, I found a joint and smoked it after school. Mm-hmm. Like, I want you to visualize, what are you going to do if your son comes home from school and tells you that? What? You smoked a joint and da-da-da, and this is terrible and da-da-da. You know, I mean, that is a great way for your kid to not ever want to tell you anything ever again. Mm-hmm. You know, when my brother told my dad that he was attracted to men, when I told my mom and dad that I had done a litany of bad things, they never freaked out. I'm 37 years old. I've never heard my dad yell. Ever. I mean, that's kind of remarkable, right? Now, he would punish. He would give consequences all the time. I think a safe space in our house looked like a place where I could tell my parents things and I could count on a reasonable interaction. And I also could see and feel that they had my best interest at heart. You know, and they did a great job of saying, hey, we're giving you this consequence because we love you and we want to see good things happen for you.
Right. Absolutely. So are you vulnerable with your children? Are you honest about your failures? Do they see repentance in you? And why is this so important?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I mean, you obviously know the answer to this too. Kristen is so good at apologizing to her children when she messes up. You probably apologize to our kids 3 or 4 times a week. I probably have to do it once or twice a week where we'll apologize to them. We try to never lie to our kids.
Right.
You know, and this is a lot, but you know, I remember Isabel asked us about sex, our oldest daughter, and this is a couple years ago. She asked us about sex, and Kristen explained it to her, and you know, I was like, oh my goodness. But you know, our mentors have always said, explain stuff to your kids 5 years before you think they need it.
Right.
And then, you know, I remember Kristen and I were going to the bedroom to share some intimacy together in the middle of the day, and Isabel is like, Mom, Dad, are you guys gonna go have sex right now? And I was like. And I just froze. And Kristen is like, yeah, that's what we're going to go do. Don't knock on the door. But I think that's such a big deal. Like, that is vulnerability, and I don't want my kid to figure out the answer to that 5 years from now and think, my parents lied to me.
Right.
You know, I want to have a home where my kids, if we say something, my kids know that it's the truth. Does that make sense? For anything. So for Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, all of it. And it's not that, you know, whatever. The story of St. Nicholas, Santa Claus isn't a bad story. It's all good. It's not that there's this big thing. The biggest reason we don't do that in our house is because I want my kids to say, my mom and dad always told us the truth.
Right.
And count on them to tell us the truth. They didn't freak out. They didn't lose their mind. Our home was an authentic, real, safe place. And we could always count on my parents being rooted in the gospel of Jesus, telling the truth, and being a place of redemption. And I think that's the gospel framework at our house. We're pointing our kids back to Jesus. We're telling them the truth all the time, focusing on that. So.
Absolutely. So what is your biggest distraction from gospel framework as a parent?
You know, I mean, for me, it's definitely performance. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It is so easy for me, you know, to have a kid bring back a spelling test where they got, 19 out of 20. And to be like, hey, that's disappointing. You got 19 out of 20, da-da-da-da-da, and I'll talk with them. And like, hey, did you, on the grammar tests right now at the Christian school are crazy. And it's like, hey, you got 5 wrong on this. You need to talk to your teacher. I'm going to email your teacher. You stay in from recess, and you figure out what you did wrong, And I am more passionate about my kids 5 wrong on a grammar test than I am about refining their character and conforming it to the image of God. Mm-hmm. And that's a problem. That's a big problem. And it's just in the modicum of that moment, but I recognize if I don't catch it there, it's going to extend to greater places. And it begins in here, me as a leader. And they see that, right? Because what does my kid learn from that? Their grammar results and grades are more important than the gospel. So we're out of time.
That's good. Well, Can I ask you one more question?
Okay.
So that being said, how do you keep open conversations in the family? Whether it's about hey, I'm sorry, I put too much pressure on grades. How do you do that in your everyday life? Keep that open conversation with the kids.
I think it begins with my personal relationship with Jesus. If we're gonna, your kids are always gonna be passionate about what you're passionate about.
Right.
My kids all love water skiing. You know why? Because I ooze passion for water skiing and board direct drive American Water Ski Association tournament certified record-setting ski boats. They know that. They know about our boat. You know why? Because Dad's passionate about it.
Right.
They know, you should have seen, my kids, when they talk about what they want to be when they grow up, they're like, my daughters, I want to meet with women and share Jesus with them. You know why? Because their mom is passionate about sharing Jesus with people. My son wants to be a campus director because he sees his mom being passionate about being a campus director at Hebron. They go to church in Hebron, right? And I think it's such a big deal when my kids are more passionate about something than they are about God. It's just a conviction that, oh man, I am more passionate about something than I am about God at home. Do my kids see me reading the Bible? Do they see me praying? Do they see me pointing the family to Jesus, pointing my wife to Jesus, and pointing myself to Jesus?
Right.
So anyway, yeah.
So if you could leave them with anything or challenge, what would it be?
The win is the gospel. Do you want to have great kids? Do you want to have kids that have great marriages? The best way to guarantee that, statistically, is to point your kids to the gospel of Jesus Christ. The traditional, unchanging, orthodox gospel of Jesus Christ, as it's been for 2,000 years. Turn to Jesus for the forgiveness of sins. Sins is defined as a traditional interpretation of what sin is in the Bible. That, regardless of what you actually believe, is the best way to guarantee your kids are going to have a great life.
Right, and you'll be able to spend eternity with them in heaven.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Pastor John. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I cannot wait to catch you for the next one in this season. Bye. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to follow us on our other social media platforms. We don't want you to miss out on any future content. Thank you so much again, guys. I hope you have a great day. And I want you to know I am personally praying that your roots stay strong.